Okay, the last thing on my list is I get to retire. Deborah is going to introduce the speaker here, and I've been talking to her nonstop since I got here. You're going to be very interested in what she has to say.
We'll see.
So Skip asked me to find a speaker, and this lady and I are always at the fort, at Fort Deshar in June. And she came over and visited with me, and she kept talking about these tapestries, and she kept using the word French, and I said, oh, well, you're going to have to be our speaker. And then here came Bob, and Bob went over, I believe, and talked to her. And by that time you were a shoo-in, whether you wanted to be or not. But it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Miss Cathy Grafton. I've known her for many years now. She's a friend and a fellow living historian and a teacher and a fellow artisan. And we go way back. She has been an early American life artisan for 10 years now, and she's here this weekend because she's actually stationed over at the pewter shop with other fellow early American life artisans. She's been a reenactor for 52 years, mostly 18th century. She has some Civil War and medieval living history experience as well, and she currently participates in 10 to 12 events annually. The Feast of the Hunter's Moon was her first event, and that remains near and dear to her heart. Regarding the tapestry, Cathy's been studying this very thing now. She's going to talk about it in depth today, but she's been actually with it since she was a child, learning to embroider. Did you say 8 years old?
When I started learning embroidery, yeah.
Okay.
6, 7.
Okay. She has been to France over 20 times to see it, has read extensively about it, and she is completing sections of it, courtesy the Chantal James Workshop, correct? Mm-hmm. And her study has taken her to most of the places that she will mention today. She has learned the history of how it has survived for over 1,000 years. So I present to you Miss Cathy Grafton.
Thank you. Not quite 1,000 years yet, but coming up.
Okay.
I won't be here for that, I don't think. But yes, what I'd like to bring to you today, well, first of all, my first question is, how many of you have been to see it in France, in Bayeux? I know several. Good. That's always fun to see. I started going to France actually because my kids all did foreign exchange there. But I dragged my family to Bayeux the very first trip and have, like Deb said, been there over 20 times to see it. One day, I went twice. I went first in the morning. I like to be the first in line. And then late in the day, I brought my ticket stub back and said, can I go through again? And they said, sure. So I did. I've been a needleworker also through most of this time, which has really enhanced how I've learned to study the tapestry. So the parts I want to talk about are how it was created, what we know about that, and a lot of things that we don't know about how it was made, why it was made. I want to tell you the story of it. Even if you've been to see it, it's a pretty fascinating story. And then I will go to how it has survived almost 1,000 years. It's like a charmed life. So along the way, as she mentioned, Chantal James does these workshops, and I brought the piece I've been working on this weekend. She has permission to copy off the tapestry directly. These kits, if anybody's a needleworker and they want to do one, you can order them from her. And many of them are much smaller. I like the big ones, so I always order the big ones. And this last time when I went to France in April, I ordered 4, and she shipped them back to the U.S. for me so I wouldn't have to lug them around in my luggage. And they will take me many years to really catch up with 4 of them because they really take a long time. But I'll tell you a little bit about that. So my history with it is my mother gave me this book when I was about 8 or 9. History, and it is the worst book written about it. Don't ever buy this book if you happen to, because the colors are garish, nothing like what's really on the tapestry. But the one thing it has is it has a wonderful map inside the cover that shows all the places that are mentioned in the tapestry. And what I didn't realize because this is what I studied, and of course that was 60 some years ago, more like, there weren't as many books written as there are today. So I had this book, and I would pore over it, and I would take my favorite bird and learn to stitch it and that kind of thing. But the first time I went to see the tapestry, I was blown away by the fact that it was mended. All the way through, the whole walk that I did, there's a tear here, and it's been mended. Some of them beautifully mended, some of them horribly mended. Tears, all kinds of stuff. I came home and got this stupid book out, and I read that somewhere in the book it says, we have taken the images and put them on a linen-like background for clarity or something. So there's not a place on this. It's not real photographs of the tapestry. Honestly, I literally threw the book away. I threw it away. This is another copy that I bought later because I decided I wanted this map. So that was my first experience of learning, what you know and what you don't know. But I want to talk a little bit about the construction of it, because people will look at all these pieces that I've done, which are from the kits that she creates. And she has the drawing, and they're so close to the tapestry. She provides you the wool, the colors. These are a fraction of the tapestry. The tapestry is just nice 20 inches tall with borders and everything, 224 feet long. Oh my gosh. It would go around this room more than, And it's 9 pieces of linen. So the very first piece was one of the longer ones. If you can imagine Middle Ages trying to weave and manage that kind of length of linen. And until, I think, really only about 30 years ago, they thought there was 8 pieces of linen. And then they found another seam in there. They're so cleverly hidden. So that's one little key thing about it. The colors in it, there's 8 to 10 colors, depending, there's shades and variations. It's been heavily, heavily repaired in places, and some of the aniline colors, the later colors, have faded more than the original colors. They were plant dyed. They were using natural plant dyes like madder, which were for the reds. Weld brings the yellow to it, which is a really important color. Woad is the dark blue and the light blue and the very light green. And then woad and weld together gave beige and some green, dark green colors. And the stitches on it are mainly a stem stitch, which embroiders would know, and a stitch we now call the Bayeux stitch. It's a couch laid stitch, but it's so heavily used on the ships, on the horses, on all kinds of parts of it, buildings, that it's kind of called the Bayeux stitch now. And I welcome you to touch any of these pieces. They are not antiques yet. And so that you can feel that stitch, because it's a very tight stitch. And that is probably the reason that this 224 piece has survived the way it has over the years, is that very tight stitch. Even though there's holes in the linen and all that, and linen, of course, is a very strong fiber. The names for it are wonderful. It's been called things like the Tapestry of Reine Matilda. Queen Matilda was the wife of William, who is the Conqueror, who is one of the main figures. She didn't have anything to do with it. She did not stitch it. I've seen lovely paintings in France of her and her maid stitching it. No, that didn't happen. It almost assuredly was made in Canterbury, England. French won't quite acknowledge that, but they know it's true. And this will come under the things we know and the things we don't know about it. It was also known as King William's cloth, the cloth of the conquest, and the toile de Saint-Jean. Now, tapisserie is a French word We use the word tapestry. Of course, it's an embroidery. It's the biggest thing to correct when people think it's a tapestry, which we're familiar with as woven unicorns and all that. It's not that. But tapisserie in French means a cloth that tells a story, a wall hanging. So that is why they called it that. And so, you know, just knowing that alone, that it's not a tapestry, even though we call it the Bayeux Tapestry. And why does it live in Bayeux? They aren't going to let it go again. I'll tell you about the times they did. But that is where it has most likely spent most of its life. And they're very protective of it. I was lucky enough to go this year, and this fall it will be taken down until 2027. They are building a brand new museum for it. It's time. It's been in several places over the years in museums, and they have the design all laid out. They're going to have all kinds of interactive stuff going on while it's being conserved. I am bold enough with my years of stitching that I wrote the director last year and said I would volunteer to come and help stitch on it or whatever. And he was so kind that he took time to write me back and say thank you. We really won't be stitching on it. We will be cleaning it. There might be some mending, but it'll all be done by highly trained conservators. And he sent me a little book. But I thought that was very nice that he did that. I mean, he was probably kind of amazed that this woman from Illinois sent him pictures of the work she'd done and said, I'll come help. And I tempted myself to go talk to him when I was there, but I did chickened out.
For those of us who are not stitchers or embroiderers, what is, and I accept what you say that it's not a tapestry, what is the difference between a tapestry?
Well, a tapestry is woven. It's woven on a loom. On a loom. This was stretched onto some kind of tightening, you know, frame, and it was hand stitched with wool thread. If you saw a tapestry, I should have a picture of one or something to show the difference. You would know, you would see the difference. If you look at these, you can tell these are stitched, and they're not woven into the cloth by a loom type of thing. Yeah, so it is kind of hard to understand. What else can I say about that? I'm just trying to make sure of that before I tell you the story of it. Anyway, it's an amazing piece of needlework, and probably, to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most amazing piece of needlework in the world that's this complete. There are a few sections. There's one section missing that they're saying will be returned. The end of it was worn down. I'll explain why that happened. The beginning and the end are some of the saddest parts of it. And the end has been heavily redone, and people question whether some of that's real, was in the real design. I will say, about talking generally about the tapestry, it was designed by a man, definitely, because there are parts, big parts of it that are about war. Women would not have been knowing about that. It's proved things like there were stirrups at this time period. There's stirrups on the people in the tapestry, and things like that. And that would, but I'm 99% sure it was stitched by women, by nuns in Canterbury. So there's, you know, a little give and take there. The borders that are on much of it, which you'll see on the pieces I've laid out and the pieces we're going to show you in a little more detail, are a very important part of it. Sometimes when I go, I look at the main part of it, and then I go back and spend time on the borders, because Aesop's fables are in there. There are all kinds of wonderful birds. We talked this morning over at the pewter factory. I was saying, you know, how come all the dragons shown on the tapestry have a knot in their tail? I don't know enough about medieval history to know if that was a tradition, if that's just a design thing, but the dragons have knots in their tail. Kind of neat. But they're there, and sometimes those stories seem to have something to do with what's going on in the main part of it. And sometimes maybe we're just seeing that from a modern view. There's one one scene telling the fable with, I think it's a fox and a stork trying to drink out of a narrow vessel. I don't know if you remember that one. And the stork is bragging that he can just put his beak down and drink. And the fox goes, well, I can drink from it. And there's how will you do it? Well, he puts pebbles in, one after the other, till it raises the water level, and then he can drink. So they're both claiming this. Okay, who was claiming this crown? Harold and William. They were both claiming the crown. Is it something to do with that, or is it just a coincidence? There's so many things we don't know. I'm hoping someday when I go to heaven that there'll be like the tapestry up there, and God's going to say, all right, let's walk along and I'll tell you all the truth. All right, so the story of it is, and this is very interesting, really, because there's a few things we don't know about it, some things we really do know, and this is what's on the tapestry. 1064, Harold Godwinson, who was a very powerful English lord. He was the brother of Edith, who was the wife of Edward the Confessor, the king. And he was sent to Normandy, supposedly, according to the tapestry, to tell William, who was a cousin, that he would be the next king, that he would be named king by Edward the Confessor, because Edward was getting older. He didn't have any children, legitimate children. I don't think he had any children at all. And so Harold set off. I have a new one I just did of Harold with his hawk. He set off, and he took a ship, crossed the channel to tell William. Edward the Confessor, just as an aside, had been in parts of Normandy for some time and gotten to know William when he was before he was king. So there's a connection there. So he was blown off course and he was taken prisoner. And when he was taken prisoner, this is all depicted on the tapestry. He was taken prisoner, and William got wind of that, sent his messenger to say, bring him to me, brought him to him. And then he had some discussions with Harold, and then he invited him to come on campaign with him. And they were fighting against Guy de Ponthieu. And they decided that they would go to various places in Brittany and Normandy and have battles with this guy who was giving William grief. Now, William was a bastard, son of William what was his father's name? His father's name was something like William the All-Powerful or something, and Arlette, the laundress, who he met and had a child with. And but he was also the heir. So this happened. Then something very important happened. This is the newest piece that I got. William and Harold went back to Rouen, and there's the sacred, different sacred things, and Harold proclaimed and swore an oath to William that he would support him as king. That's a key thing, because it's breaking this oath that he made that ends up with an arrow in the eye at the end of the tapestry. So then he sailed back to England. He was free then to go back to England, and he gets back and he sees Edward the Confessor has become very weak, soon dies. He's carried and to Westminster Abbey, this funeral. Next panel, Harold's king. Harold's proclaimed king. Now, knowing English history, it was really the Wiccan or the group of lords that should have been able to declare the king, not Edward the Confessor. So there's some contention there, but they kind of skirt over that. So then there's, I've got some pieces that I want to show you, and I'm going to hold this one up because I can, and I'm going to let her bring the rest around. So what happens right after Harold is declared king, Halley's Comet is seen in the sky. And the people point to it in the tapestry as an omen. And look down below. There's little ghost boats. Now, to me, that would be sort of foreshadowing that this isn't over yet. We're going to have something else happen. So that's what happens. Immediately, William gets wind of this. The next few scenes are him planning, starting to have the boats built. I mean, you know, if any of us woodworkers, there's ads and different things, chopping down trees. They're showing actually how the boats were built. Then provisioning the boats, all that's on the tapestry. And they start sailing across, and they land, and they clear the ground, and they have this battle. In the meantime, what's not talked about on the tapestry that's kind of a key thing is the fact that the king's gone, there's a new king, so everybody thinks they can come be king of England. And the other guy who does that, Harold Sigerson, we've got many Harolds in the story, and Hardradi. Harold Sigerson Hardradi, which means hard ruler, and he was the king of Norway, and he decided he'd be king of England, so he gets way up north of England and invades. And Harold gets his army together and does a forced march north. None of this is on the tapestry. And he meets this guy at Stamford Bridge. That's another very famous English battle. And and he says he can give this other Harold 6 feet of good English ground. And there's really detailed stories about this bridge and what happened, and they hold the bridge for a long time. Eventually, Harold Sigerson is killed, and he was pretty famous. And then he had to turn around south because he gets word that William has crossed the channel, is waiting for him. So he does another forced march back down. So none of this is on the tapestry, but it really does figure into the story. There's 50 panels that tell this story, and we don't get to the Battle of Hastings, which we all learned in history when they still taught history in 1066. It all happened in 1 year, this part of it, until, you know, I mean, he's marching south. It's all coming to an end. That's way into the middle of the tapestry. So what happens? The battle commences. All kinds of things happen in the battle. Bishop Odo, an important person, half-brother to William. You don't have to take notes, but he's a bishop. He can't shoot or kill people, so he just carries a big club. So you see him in the tapestry with a club because he can smack them. And there's a scene in the tapestry, and that's depicted. There's a scene in the tapestry where they think William's been killed. He turns around and lifts his visor so they can see that he's still with them. They bring up the archers. The battle goes all day. It's not a pretty sight. And finally, near the end, there is... They brought up the archers, which are shown in the base, you know, of the tapestry, and Harold gets an arrow in the eye. Of course, he broke an oath. So, and then he's hacked. There's 2 scenes. There's argument whether both of those are Harold. I think they are, or one of them is Harold. But I think the arrow in the eye was part of it. You know, I think that had to happen for this story to be told the way it was. So, so that's that. Now, what I'd like to show you are a couple of funny things from the tapestry. And then William, of course, is crowned king, but we don't get to see that because that part of it's missing. Then I'm going to have Deb bring these around and show you because they're just too fascinating. The first one is my favorite panel. You can walk it around. Okay. These are 2 of the horses. And to get an idea of the personality, look at these horses. They are like they're drawn from real life. They have such personality. And they're being held by a dwarf who was known at the time. Now, dwarfs were very important to be in the courts for some reason. You know, they seem to always have them. And this one is mentioned by name. There is some writing on the tapestry, and that's always interesting when someone's mentioned by name. But I just love doing those horses so much. I thought they were so cute. And that's what is so wonderful about the tapestry to me, is it's not just about a battle and about the war. It's about life at that time period. So it tells you things. So here he is holding these lovely horses, and then you see the borders above and below that tell a little bit. And I think this one, down below, shows a man hunting with snares, catching birds. So, and there's plowing scenes. There's just wonderful little bits of life in it. So that's just one of my favorites. And you'll also notice that the horses are all stallions. Believe me, all the horses in this thing are stallions. And they are quite vividly depicted. As a matter of fact, this book, and when the ladies of Leek recreated it in the 1840s or 50s, they took some naked men out of the tapestry because they did not feel that was appropriate. And there are several scenes of men wrestling and different things that happen where they're naked people. But they weren't shy back then about it. Now, this story, I'm telling you some detailed stories. This is a piece that you will only see that was made specially for me by Chantel. And the reason this piece is so important, I mean, we'll just hold this one up, but we'll leave it out where you can see it, is it depicts something that we think happened in history. This is Mont Saint-Michel, one of my favorite places. And one of the things we know, again, saying that men probably did this, or someone who knew something about this place, is how it's shown to be built, because that is how it was built. They did not cut the mountain off. They built panels up and everything. So to know that, you would have to know some architecture or be familiar with the history of Mont Saint-Michel. Look to the man here sitting on a chair pointing at it. All right, at that time when this would have taken place, this is early, before Harold and William have become enemies when they're going off to war together. There was a monk at Mont Saint-Michel named Scoland. He later became Bishop Scoland and was in charge of Canterbury when the tapestry was most likely made. To me, he's the best candidate for having designed the tapestry. I didn't come up with this idea. It's well thought out by many scholars. But he is someone who likely might have. And what it depicts is Harold down there rescuing some men who had fallen in the quicksand around the island. Now, if that's a story that happened, it would have been locally known by people, possibly this person. And I just find that fascinating. So Chantel will, if you give her a section that you want, she will do it and then charge you for it. And but she took this after I asked her to do it and shortened it down to sell as a kit. But this is the only one that's this full thing, because I wanted the whole thing. I said, yeah, it'll take me forever. Well, let's put this one over here, and they can look at this after. But I want you to see that, because that's an important part of the story as I kind of see it. Then I have a couple here that are just fun. We'll hold these up because they're all so big. I mentioned that the king, Edward the Confessor, had died, and he's carried to Westminster Abbey. That's his funeral train over there with him mummified and rolled up. Now, Westminster Abbey was brand new, so new. How do you know it was new? Where is it? Because here's the boy putting the weather vane up. Brand new. Not only that, it's got the depiction of it is somewhat similar. But what I find lovely, the hand of God is coming down to bless it. But here's the most fun part. There's a bird up here nibbling on the top. Now, somebody had a sense of humor, right? You know? Was that drawn in? Why did they decide to do that? I don't know. Is it a story? Was something happening? Or is it just the stitcher deciding to, well, let's just have fun with this? I don't know. But I did not ever know that. I knew about the hand of God. I knew about the weather vane. But until I was stitching it, I did not realize that there's this little bird up here nibbling on the top dome of the church. How cool is that? That's another one we got to have out so people can see it. And then the last little, well, we did that one. Then the last little jokey one is, I'll just do this one. I can do this one. So they depict several meals. Here we have Bishop Odo kind of overseeing this meal before the battle. But if you look really close, there's a guy here. Oh, let's see. I can't see it upside down. this guy here has his elbow in the way of the guy next to him who's trying to steal the bread. Again, this was not anything I ever noticed until I got this piece to stitch. And I thought, I just got such a amusing, so there's maybe more in there that we haven't found, because I'm not doing the whole thing. There is a gal in England right now who is doing the whole thing. She has been working 7 years on it. She's more than halfway. She's crazy. I'm not crazy, I just do bits.
Is she in France?
No, she's actually in England, and she does post about it. Her name's Mia Hansen, if you want to look. Yeah, there's the pictures. So I have some pictures. While I keep talking here, these are lightly marked in the corners. These are places, some of which I've taken pictures of, but they're all places I've been that are mentioned on the tapestry. So I'm going to pass those around and let you look at those. So those are just some of the fun things about the story. It's an amazing story, really, that it tells. Because one of the other things I'll say before I talk about how it survived is it fairly treats both Harold and William. Harold is shown to be brave, rescuing people, brave, fighting. Yeah, he swears an oath, and yeah, he breaks the oath, but he gets shot in the eye for it. And, so it's kind of interesting. You don't see it as this was, one bad guy and one good guy. They both have their flaws and their good points. So I just find that interesting. It is propaganda. It is a cartoon. Now, where was it during all this time? Well, for 400 years, we don't know where it was. Honest to God, we don't know. But mostly it has lived in the Cathedral of Bayeux, which you will see. So it is most likely commissioned by Bishop Odo. Remember, I mentioned Bishop Odo, the half-brother of William. He became the Bishop of Bayeux. And we think it was made, they have carbon dated, it was made within about 15 years of the battle. And that's kind of important too. So what we do know and we don't know for sure who commissioned it, but we think Bishop Odo is very likely. We don't know if Bishop Skoland was the one who designed it, but I'm going with that until they come up with something better. I think that's very possible. There was no mention for about 400 years. Then, in 1476, when they did inventory at the cathedral, it would be displayed each year in the spring during the Festival of the Relics. And they would line it up around the church and people would do it. Now, knowing that many people wouldn't have been reading at this time, the pictures on it would have told the story for them. So that was very important. Odo's mentioned on the tapestry, so that's another reason. And some of his men are mentioned by name. Another reason that, they probably were somehow involved in it. Yeah, the designer part, I've never seen anyone else coming up with any idea about a designer that I think makes more sense. When Bishop Skoland became an abbot, he also went to Rome and saw Trajan's column, which has got a lot of designs on it and things that kind of blend into things on the tapestry. And so it would have been someone who traveled to know these sort of things. Now, how did it escape? Well, the cathedral burned several times during those 400 years, and it somehow managed to go through. But in the 1500s, 1562, the religious wars, all through Europe, and very heavily in France. It was kept in a box in the Becket chapel of the church. And some people... it didn't have gold or silver on it. That's another key thing. Nobody was going to take it apart to reclaim the gold or silver. But here it was, these religious wars, the cathedrals were often attacked and burned, and it still made it through. But in 1792, when the French Revolution started, people said, hey, let's take some arms to the battle, and let's go get that old thing in the church and cut it up to cover the relics or the ammunition and stuff. And a local magistrate, Mr. Lambert Lanier Forster, he was the prefecture of police. He came out and got the tapestry and said, here, take these sacks, take these things, and I'll just take care of that. And he kept it in his office for the duration. And his picture's in the museum as a thank you, because he probably saved it from being cut into pieces, and once it was cut up, it was never going to be the same. His portrait has hung in the museum ever since. In 1793, the Louvre opened, and Bayeux was afraid that it would be taken from them, because by then they knew they had something of value. Somebody else wanted to cut it up and put it on a float for parades. Let's just show it around. No, they didn't do that. 1805, and then the Louvre didn't want it. They didn't want it. They had it a couple times, but they didn't want it, because where are they going to put it? In their hallways, 1803, Napoleon came along. What happened when Napoleon was there? What did Napoleon want to do? Conquer England, right? He demanded that it be brought to the Louvre for an exhibition. Well, they couldn't say no to Napoleon, so they brought it there. And it was on display for several months. They brought it in a dray wagon, an old wagon. By this time, they had mounted it on rollers. They had rollers that would roll it across a table. So one end would unroll and roll onto the other end, and they would roll it back and forth so people could see it. And that's where the damage began on the beginning and the end of it that are so heavy. But the Louvre said, okay, you can have it back, because this takes up too much room. So they sent it back. But it was becoming more well known by that. It had been where in Paris, where people had seen it. So someone made a play of it. And visitors started coming to Bayeux and seeing it all the time. The Ladies of Leek, I mentioned them in England, created. It took them 35 women 1 year to restitch a new version of it. I thought that's interesting that we know. That's why I'm not doing it. Then that was in the late 1800s, 35 women. Visitors were coming all the time now, and they were starting to say things about it. John Ruskin said, the most interesting thing ever conceived. William Morris, that great designer, and George Eliot, Alfred Lord Tennyson said, a very blessed work indeed. John Constable came and said, almost as bad as an ancient Mexican painting. He was a painter. He didn't like it. Charles Dickens' view was a work of very feeble amateurs. Winston Churchill came at one point and said, a story told with irresistible charm. But the key time to me was during World War II. And there's been a book written about it. But during 1941 and 1945, the fact that this piece of art and history survived is almost a miracle. The Germans were occupying France. What did Germany want to do? They wanted to conquer England. And so there was a whole commission of guys that came to study the tapestry. By then, Bayeux had it in a concrete bunker in the basement. They were protecting it. Goring wanted it for one of his castles in Westphalia. Somebody else wanted it to give to Hitler. I mean, there was a lot of people. The thing is, the Germans were so well organized that it took them time to do things. They had to have official studies, official reports, official written things. Thank goodness. Because what they did was they came and studied it. They decided at one point that it was a little too close to the beaches. Well, they didn't know about that happening yet, but that it was too close to England, where it could be attacked. So they moved it to an abbey nearby, the Abbaye Junet-Mondet. I tried to go there this year because I want to see it, but I didn't get there. Anyway, that didn't work. They studied it, they took pictures of it, they wrote things about it, but they were slow moving. In 1941, Bayeux decided to move it. A lot of the Louvre had been emptied out almost entirely, and a lot of its treasures were to a chateau called Sourches near Le Mans, and they wrote the word museum on the roof so that the Allies wouldn't bomb it. And they had all these rooms in the basement, and the most important room had the Mona Lisa and among other things had the Bayeux Tapestry. So by now France knew this was a treasure and was treating it as such. It was in room 9, which was the most important treasures. And this is to me fascinating. In 1944 they planned to move it. Germany figured out where it was. Allies had no clue, not that they were really looking for it yet, but they were looking for it at some point. And Germany started going, all right, we're going to move it in stages. We'll get it back to Paris first, and then from Paris we'll take it to Germany, because we're going to be leaving soon. This was probably as D-Day was happening. And this was Himmler's plan. So late in the time, they moved it to the Louvre. You know how they moved it to the Louvre? At this point, they were using gasoline-powered and wood-fired burning engines on trucks. And they're moving this through bomb-ridden roads. It just, I mean, I'm so glad that happened before I was born, so I didn't have to worry about it. Bayeux was unaware that it was being moved. They had lost track now. They're thinking it's still safe in this chateau. So on D-Day, and this is, when I started going to Bayeux, which is, I love, if I ever go to France for a long period of time, that's where I'll stay. I started going to see the Tapestry, but I got hooked into D-Day beaches. So I have now visited those as well. And by taking very small tours there, little bus tours you go, the young men doing these tours are grandsons of the people living from that time. And they've told me a couple of fascinating stories. One is, on D-Day, the town of Bayeux was deserted by the Germans almost immediately. And a church, or a priest in the town, took a bicycle from the church, and he rode through the enemy lines. And he found the Allies, it was probably Americans and British, and said, do not bomb Bayeux. The Germans have left. Probably saved the town. Now, at that point, the Allies were starting to look for this tapestry, and they thought it was in Bayeux, so that worked out pretty well. The other story he told me that broke my heart was Normandy cows. The cows there are quite wonderful and very curious. And the cows would like walk up to the hedgerows, you know, the countryside's covered by hedgerows, and they'd walk up to the hedgerows and kind of look through to see who are these people crouched down, you know, in the hedgerows. And so the Germans just started shooting the cows because they were giving away where people were. And that was kind of sad. Anyway, on D-Day, there was a dispatch sent to look for the tapestry, but nobody knew where it was. At least nobody for sure knew where it was. And the most interesting thing, too, which you can see today if you go to Bayeux, is as the British came to the town, they couldn't drive their tanks through those little narrow streets. They created a ring road around the town, which has been enlarged and is still there today. And so that's kind of important. So, all right, we've got the tapestry. They take it to the Louvre, which is pretty empty. I think the Winged Victory was still there somewhere and a few big pieces, but was pretty empty. And on August 18th, England intercepted a communication from Himmler saying, bring the tapestry before you leave Paris. That's amazing. On August 22nd, General von College, he'd been put in charge of Paris. He was there to blow it up, to destroy it before the Allies came. He was being worked on pretty heavily by people who are going, hey, General, you really don't want to be known as the man who blew up Paris. And he wanted any excuse not to do it. He put mines on the bridges. He had everything ready, but he was holding off. And they were praying he would hold off. And he'd only been sent there a few weeks earlier. I mean, it's really a fascinating story. To me, he's kind of a hero. He did not want to be known as the man who destroyed Paris. So he waited, and 2 SS guys arrived with guns. And he thought they were coming to arrest him because he had not done what Hitler said. No, they said, we're here for the tapestry. So he takes him out on the balcony of the hotel where he was staying, and he leans out and he says, it's down there at the Louvre. By then, the Free French had started to fight. The Louvre was in their hands. And he said, I'm sure you guys, you know, they had 2 trucks and they were ready to take it. So I'm sure you guys can go down there and get it. And they were never heard from again. No. And so that's how close it was in another way. I mean, it blows my mind, really. And they had one truck full of gasoline for the trip and then one truck to take it. And on the 25th, Paris was liberated. So within a week, it was, in danger so many times. Once again, the Louvre put it on display. Bayeux sat and went, uh-oh, they're going to keep it this time. And they had it there for a while. Many people came to see it, and they said, okay, you can have it back. And they have vowed that it will never be taken that far again. One of the things that I find very touching is that on the edge of Bayeux is the British cemetery. And over the gate, they have put an inscription that says, "We who were conquered by William have liberated the land of the conqueror." And I just think that's pretty amazing. So that's kind of the story of how it survived, and it continues to be a treasure. And if you've never been to see it, I hope in 2027 you might consider going to see it, because everybody should see this thing. It's staggering how much beauty there is in it. My pieces here are laid out kind of early to late, with a wonderful battle scene where the horses are almost upside down. I was stitching that while I had my hip replaced many years ago in the hospital, and the nurses stopped by every day to see how far I was getting on the horses. But I'll end with that, but I'd like some questions, and I'm sure you'll want some time to look at these closer. Questions? Yes?
So how long does it take you to do one of those?
Well, because I'm mostly working on silk ribbon pieces and doing my festivals with those, it takes me a pretty long time. That one especially took a long time. This one I'm working on now is also very large. It'd probably take me a year on and off. I mean, I won't work on it steadily. For one thing, it's a little hard on your hands to just do something too repetitive. And I've got festivals between now and at least October. So, yeah, I'll be doing that. But it is much slower work than my ribbon work, which goes pretty fast. But I did the little bitty one of the horse with Harold on it and the falcon. I did that on the trip this time. Bought it while I was there to just work on while I was in France for almost a month. And I worked on it quite a bit there. It's a way to meet people for me. People love to come up and talk to you about it. And then finished it when I got home. So that was pretty fast. Yeah?
You mentioned that there's a piece that might be reunited with it. Do
Yes.
they know where it is? Who has it? Is it a
They
campaign
must.
promise?
That's all I've heard so far. They know who took it. It was probably the wife of one of the guys who was hired to map it and study it in the, I think he was there in either the late 1800s or early 1900s, and a piece was cut out of it. It was a piece out of the top border. I'm not sure where that piece is. I think in one of my books it might tell. So I'm not sure, but they're saying it's going to be reunited with it. So that's going to be very fun to hear about. Yes?
You said that it's first mentioned in history in the 15th century.
Yes.
How do they know that it's 400 years older than that?
The carbon dating showed that.
Well,
And there is some mention of it at that point, that it was displayed at the new cathedral in Bayeux when it was built, which was just 12 years after the battle.
Would these have-
Then for 400 years,
Would
nothing.
these have been French nuns or Norman nuns who...
English nuns,
English
probably, in Canterbury, unless they took some over. I mean, it's not... They've tried to talk about like because the colors in it, the madder and the woad and all that, were found in both countries, so they can't use that as any kind of indication. But, and they've talked about the style. My question is, were the borders free to be created by the people doing it? I don't think so, but there's some real different parts of it where the borders, like the birds look totally different here, or the designs look totally different here. So I'm sure there's a certain amount of that was just done by the people doing it. But I'm not sure about the nuns, who the nuns would have been. But at Canterbury nuns, it was in England, and they were probably English. French don't want to hear that. Yes?
I may be
be asking you to
Your
repeat-
Majesty.
Yeah, I may be asking you to repeat yourself, but
That's
you
okay.
mentioned at one point that it was made as like a cartoon or to tell a story. But can you repeat why it was made and where would it have been put up to be viewed initially?
It was made to commemorate the battle and the whole meeting of them. But it was actually supposedly made, and that's a little fuzzy too, but that it was made to commemorate the new cathedral in Bayeux, which is in those pictures. You might wonder where these will go someday. These pieces that I have, which I will tell you, because my kids aren't going to hang these on their walls, I can tell you. And many people have tried to buy them, and I could not charge, even adding up what I pay her to get them. But I made a connection with, now I'll forget it. It's a college. It's a small college in Minnesota, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's they have a medieval studies program. So I wrote to them and went up to give a lecture there and told them that I plan to donate them there someday when I don't want them as study pieces, or and I have so many now. I mean, I didn't have this many when I did that. I might give some somewhere else. Maybe I would give some to some place like the Art Institute, because it's a great way for people to actually see what it looked like when it was new. And I don't finish any of them because they go on a big roller so that I can keep them fairly decent. Linen is horrible to iron. And I'm not really sure, but I think it's important that that's why they're touchable. There's nothing, these aren't that special that they can't be. Yes?
I just had a question. You mentioned a lady, Chantal. How does she create these kits for you?
It's amazing. I'd like to watch her do it. I'll show you this one. So when the kit comes to you, you have the picture, which is from the actual tapestry piece. And the one I've chosen is this one where Harold is swearing on the relics, the holy relics. And then you have a key. We have all the wool. And if you need more, you just write her and say, I need more. And then you have a key, which I can read now because I've read many of them, which tells you, this is several pages, I guess. It's not one long one. That tells you which color and which stitch to use. And it's very easy. It's really very easy to read. She's making faces. It's really very easy to read once you've done some small ones. I would not suggest one this big for your first, but you could do the Halley's Comet one easy. Matter of fact, I did this one with just looking at something else. I didn't even. And then she gives you some basic instructions in French and English. And there's videos you could watch too. But so how she does it, that's the tricky part. I don't know. She has a light table, I'm sure, and she has created. So the key is here, so it's all drawn out, and the lines totally disappear as you stitch it. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
How do the panels you're creating compare to the size of the originals? Are they the same?
This is exact.
Exactly.
This
Wow.
she has permission, and they use her in all their videos. If you go to see to the museum and you see someone stitching, it's her. And we have lunch. I mean, that's how close we are. Also, I've sold a lot of these kits for her. Yeah, we had lunch twice this year. She, because the reason I bought 4 is because she's getting older, and she said, I'm going to sell this business. I'm like, I'm too old to take it over, so you're going to have to work on someone else. But she would like to sell it to someone who would continue doing it. She does the best. There's other people that have created things, but I don't think any of them do as close to what it is, because I can get out on my computer and get a close-up of the tapestry. You can all do that if you go to their site. And I can look at the stitches, and she is just dead on. Yeah.
So, like Laura was asking, one of the points you said was that in the 1800s, there were some ladies that recreated.
The Ladies of Leek, yes, in England.
And so, what were they? the Bayeux tapestry is still the original.
Mm-hmm. There's one in England that they made.
So those ladies who took the liberty of putting clothing on some of the people, that was in the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that recreated?
Somewhere in England. I've known where it is. I can't remember offhand, but you could, if you looked up Ladies of Leek tapestry, you'd find it. And so you can see it there. Yes?
You said that this was instructive for people that couldn't read.
Yeah.
But what are the letters?
The letters are Latin, and they tell a bit of the story. They've been translated. One of my big, heavy books has all of them written out. So like this one that I'm working on says, here Harold is swearing, basically, is swearing on the sacraments. Here Harold and William, and here's William, are like swearing to, William's knighting him. William actually knighted him, gave him a knight as a knight too. So that's what that one is telling. Where Harold is shot in the eye, it says here Harold is dying, is killed, and in Latin. And I think that was another key thing about where it might have come from. I can't remember what that is. Anybody else? Yeah.
I wonder if that bird pecking on the top was kind of a symbolism of a crane or a stork that would build a nest, which was good luck if it happened on a church steeple.
Oh, that could be. That could be.
Because it's a new.
Yeah, because it's brand new. I mean, there's probably many more little things like that are waiting to be discovered by someone. But some of these are harder to see when you're looking at it, because it's a very, there's a lot to see, especially the borders. If you look at these, pay attention to the borders when you get down to the battle, and you suddenly see the birds going like this, and then in the bottom you see like horse heads and bodies and armor and swords and things. Yeah.
Kitty, who actually owns this? I mean, the city or
France.
the museum?
France owns it.
Oh, France.
Yeah, it became a patrimony of France at some point.
But what control does Bayeux have now in terms of keeping it there? I mean, some kind of an agreement?
Yeah, it's established that it will be kept at Bayeux. Even, there was a big thing when they first announced that this new museum. England said, well, we want to see it, bring it over. And everybody said, oh, Macron's going, yeah, we'll send it over for a while. No, not going to happen. The conservators in charge quietly said, no, it's not going anywhere. So, yes?
I thought the museum it's in now was especially built for it.
Yeah, it was the first. I've been in all the places it was, and the first one it was in was real narrow like this, and it should horseshoe around. It doesn't. It goes halfway, turns the corner, and goes the rest, and you really don't get the whole visual of it. I think that's sad. Now, what the new one that I went through, the new exhibit, is going to be all out, all the way, and Bayeux is. Like any town, you probably don't have any contention here in St. Genevieve between groups or anything, right? They have that. There's a lot of people in Bayeux that do not like this new museum, but they weren't asked to design it. Designers were. And there's a lot of things that the designers know need to happen, okay? The way it's going to be protected, kept from bugs, be easy for people to see, the way it's lit, that the people by you would like to see different, but probably wouldn't have had the expertise to establish that. So I don't know much about the ins and outs of that part of it, but enough to know. Chantel told me a little. So they should ask her. She would have known what to do with it. I love her. She's absolutely incredible. I made her tell me a lot this time. I'd like to write a book about her. About how she got into doing this. Yeah. Why did you even think to do this? And she explained to me she was doing other things, and this caught her eye, and she thought somebody should do it, and should do it correctly. And she started working with the museum, with the the people who are in charge to do it. And used to be you bought things. Her shop is now just kitty corner from the museum. And worth a stop. If you go in, say, Cathy says hi. But you can order online. If you go to, it's Bayeux Broidery. And for anyone who does needlework, I tell you, it's a great fun thing to do. You even get a needle in the packet. No, you have a needle. Pretty cool. Well, if you'd like, I'd really like you to look at these closer since I have them all out at the moment, and see if you have any other questions. I'll wander around with you a few minutes. How are we for time? I don't know. Thank you. And none of them are for sale. Don't even ask.